The world in arms. The issue clear. Victory over fascist monsters to whom democracy, culture and peace are poisoned, or defeat and the rule of terror and violence. Nothing less is at stake. 1941 evoked from the free peoples a conception of unity, of sacrifice, of heroism and determination to endure privation that has no equal in world history. It has laid the basis for the peoples to ensure that there will never be a return to the old world of the pre-war epoch. It has brought the peoples of the world into closer relationship, whether in the democratic countries or those in the occupied countries or the fascist countries themselves who yearn and long for freedom. 1941 smashed the legend of fascist invincibility by the magnificent resistance of the Red Army. Behind this resistance lies one outstanding fact. There is in the Soviet Union a political and moral unity of the entire people, which is the source of everything necessary, both for successful resistance and for ultimate victory. The Communist Party, in opening its 1942 political campaign, has one aim: to ensure that the people of Britain play a part in the fight for victory over fascism, with a readiness to work, sacrifice and fight that will as much amaze the world as the epic struggle of the Soviet people has done. We are up against the most formidable military and political combination of murderers and gangsters ever organized, a gang that knows no pity, love or charity, that has no other territorial aim but one, world domination, and that to achieve this is bleaching continents and oceans with corpses, and laying the achievements of centuries of progress in waste and devastation by fire, bomb and sword. It is an enemy with whom there can be no parley, no negotiation, no compromise. Whoever tries in any way to support this enemy brands himself as a traitor who should be shot out of hand. Now, at this moment, from every government position, either in the cabinet or its civil and armed forces, as well as from key positions in industry, the men of Munich must instantly be removed. Only when this is done will it be possible to say we have a real national government that represents the will and interest of the mass of the people. Only then will we get that response, leadership and spirit of sublime sacrifice which can overcome every obstacle, bringing behind it the willing service of every able-bodied man and woman in Britain. The actual position now is that until closer understanding has been reached for the mutual pooling of all the resources of the Allied countries, our responsibilities in Britain are immeasurably increased. There will have to be a tightening of belts because of food difficulties. There will have to be a tremendous increase in production because the demands on our output are enormously increased by the war in the Far East, the falling off of American supplies, the losses of shipping in the Battle of the Atlantic and the Pacific, the growing needs of our own armed forces in the Middle East and for a second front in Europe, and the obligation to honour our pledges to the Soviet Union. The battle for production has been fought too long with the kid gloves on. It is now time to put a horseshoe or two in the gloves. There will have to be an extraordinary strengthening of every branch of the armed forces. This can only be secured by more and more industry being manned by women labour, releasing hundreds of thousands of young men from heavy industry. This will not only mean a numerical strengthening of men able and ready to bear arms, but a political and moral strengthening of every section of the armed forces. We all have to be at the disposal of the government for any kind of war service, no matter what the inconveniences, hardships, sufferings and sacrifices may be. If our government were wise, it would at once take all essential measures to establish equal sacrifice for every section of the people. It is no use pretending that this is the case at the moment. The working people know that despite various forms of taxation, the employers are raking in millions of profits and putting large sums to reserve, and they contrast this with the shamefully low wages paid to millions of workers whose full productive capacity is retarded because of this fact. The working people have eyes to see. They know that still in Britain there are no food difficulties for the rich, no problems of transport, no shopping and housing difficulties. They see the shopping centres of the rich filled with luxury goods, and they know someone is buying them. Such shameful flaunting of luxury articles is an outrage and insult to those who are working and dying that Britain may exist as a country of free people and not of slaves. The working people know too how marked is the discrimination between sections of the rich and poor in carrying out forms of war service. They see the publicity and photographs given to women of the rich who join the ATF, but they never read of these women being sent to work in powder filling factories, to share in unhealthy and dangerous occupations that are vital for the success of the war effort. The working people are keenly aware of the class system in the appointment of officers in the armed forces. Hundreds of thousands of workers in the armed forces constantly write to their own people about what they see taking place under their very eyes. The working people read of officer pilots and sergeant pilots being asked not to dine together in the same mess after they face death all night in the same bomber. These are not little things. They are the outward evidence of a system and class outlook that so far has not been able to organise the mighty democratic initiative and leadership of the common people. Britain's whole propaganda machine wants pepping up. Propaganda is one of the mightiest weapons. Those who direct it should be aces at it. Propaganda should not only inform and explain, it should rouse and inflame. It should fill the people with a burning hatred of fascism. Its attack on every political, moral and religious concept associated with democracy, peace and progress, and its anti-racial outlook. It should expose day in and day out the fascist atrocities committed on the Soviet people and those in occupied countries. How Red Army men have been tied to the caterpillar wheels of tanks, their bodies branded with the hideous sign of the swastika by red-hot knives, arms, legs, ears and noses cut off, women and girls raped and defiled, disease spread. Hatred and horror of this foul and brutal menace will evoke from our people their greatest united efforts and the spirit to endure hardship, to work and to fight in a way never seen before in Britain. The most telling broadcast the BBC has ever done was short, but it was deadly effective. It was the night a Polish woman simply said, "I don't know what astonishes me most about you British, your kindness and your courage on the one hand, or your blindness on the other. Here in Britain you don't seem to understand what's going on in the world. My husband tells me that he is horrified at your easygoing attitude in the factories, and I see that not 1 in 10 of the people I meet really knows what a German victory would mean to you. Wake up your fellow countrymen. Make them realize that everything that is valuable in life is at stake in this war. Your standard of life, your property, your persons, the sanctity of your homes, the persons of your womenfolk, your mental and spiritual liberty, your hope for the future, all depend on defeating Hitler. If only I could tell you what defeat means at the hands of the Germans." Propaganda to the conquered country should be bold and more decisive, calling for strikes, sabotage, revolt. The actions of the people there show how ready to respond they are. Let the ban on the daily worker be lifted, and we will show what anti-fascist propaganda can do. It is a scandal that the government is permitted to continue its ban on a paper that has the proudest anti-fascist record in Britain. The ban on the daily worker is also bad propaganda, because communist newspapers are only banned by the fascist powers in Britain. Yet every time in France or Germany news comes through of the illegal publication of Humanity and Rote Fahnen, great publicity is given to this as evidence of the growing anti-fascist movement in these countries. The Communist Party asks all who want to win the war against fascism to support the following policy. 1. To give full support to all necessary measures adopted by the government, but also to call for the immediate strengthening of the government so that without regard to the claims of rival political parties, it may be composed of the most capable leaders and convinced supporters of an Allied victory. 2. While taking all steps to fulfill the obligations to the armed forces in Libya and the Far East, to press forward also the demand for the speediest organization of a second front in Europe. There can be no doubt that failure to create such a front has increased the difficulties of the Red Army and also made heavier the sacrifices that its creation will inevitably entail. The second front is not in Libya or in the Far East, important as these military operations are. The Nazi war machine, the mainspring of all the strategy and force of the Axis powers, can be destroyed in one way only, on the continent of Europe. If such a front had already been created, the international situation would be far different from what it is. For 6 months Hitler was occupied on the Eastern Front so deeply that the most favourable opportunities existed to deal heavy blows from the West. How significant these blows could have been, how far-reaching their consequences, can be seen by the magnificent offensive action of the Red Army at Rostov, followed by great victories on the whole Eastern Front, which mark a turning point in the war against Hitler, and through which the entire Nazi plans have been spiked and thwarted. The front in Europe still is and will remain the principal front. It will be a fatal error if we do not immediately proceed to the organisation of a second front, so that the British and Soviet armies give joint battle to Hitler's armed thugs, supported by the peoples in the occupied countries. 3. Full support for the manpower proposals of the government, at the same time as we demand equality of sacrifice and adequate safeguards to prevent discrimination that can weaken the workers' movement in the factories and trade unions. The power and financial interests of the great monopolies are as great today as they were in 1939. In general, they are their own controllers, and the policy they pursue is in the interests of profit, the extension of their monopolies, and the safeguarding of their position after the war. The needs of war production have to be fitted into these interests instead of being the first consideration. The immediate thing in the present political and military situation is for the government to override ruthlessly all vested interests that stand in the way of the necessary practical steps to ensure maximum production. The government must take control and effective control of the mining, transport, aircraft, engineering and iron and steel industries. It must work them under a single control and plan for the production of all raw materials, eliminating the present forms of control which place the private interests of powerful sections of monopoly capitalism before the interests of the nation as a whole. Similarly, the government must take control of all land and property which can immediately serve the national interest. If this control is to be effective, the production committees, central and regional, must be given plenary powers to deal with all matters retarding production, such as bottlenecks or refusal to lend machine tools and gear, subcontracting that holds up production and similar obstacles. While some employers are working well with the trade unions and shop stewards in production committees, others are not. It should be made compulsory on all employers to work with production committees and give them all the facts, plans and other information so that management and workers can really function cooperatively in the development of production. Four, with regard to the mobilization of man and woman power, there are many steps which must be taken by the government in order to ensure the best results with a minimum of friction. Above all, constant consultation with the trade unions and in appropriate matters with the shop stewards in the allocation, training and distribution of manpower and in carrying through transferring schemes and de-reservations to prevent any attempts by the employers to weaken workshop and trade union organisation by victimizing or discriminating against shop stewards and other active trade unions. 5. The government must also apply a number of measures relating to wages. All wage rates should be raised to the level demanded by the rise in the cost of living. The special claims of low-paid workers must be met. There must be special travelling allowances for workers and their families living away from home. Income tax on overtime earnings must be abolished. There must be definite guarantees backed by penal clauses that whatever wages are earned by piecework or bonus, the rate shall not be reduced. Workers on time rates must be encouraged by the introduction of collective bonuses on output or payments at special rates where this cannot be applied. Women workers must get the full rate for the job. Building labour must be mobilised for the erection of nurseries, canteens and communal feeding centres to remove obstacles to the full use of woman power. Transport and shopping facilities should be organised in such a way as to solve difficulties for the workers. Guarantee earnings commensurate to the skill of key men at present on time rates by the introduction of collective bonus or payments of special rates for men whose jobs are of a character that do not permit of piecework, but upon whose skill and craftsmanship the efficient and rapid work of millions of other workers on piecework depends. 6. Raise the pay and allowances of the members of the armed forces and their dependents. Increase old age and widows' pensions. 7. Ration all commodities at prices within the capacity of the workers to pay. Effect a drastic reduction in the ration quotas so as to conserve food supplies and save shipping space, at the same time giving special consideration to the needs of the armed forces and workers in heavy industry. Force all hotels and restaurants to serve only the same type of meals in the same portions as in factory canteens. End the black market racket by giving penal servitude to its organisers and principals. 8. The cost plus 10% contract system should be abolished, except on definite experimental work. 9. We welcome the release of Nehru and other Congress leaders in India, but we must strongly press for the release of all the political prisoners in India, especially the working class leaders. Such a measure, accompanied by a declaration that the principles of the Atlantic Charter would be applied to India, Malaya, Burma, the Dutch East Indies and the Philippines, would generate tremendous anti-fascist forces throughout the East, would help win these countries for active participation in the struggle against the Axis powers. 10. New and serious efforts also need to be made to the Air government to find an immediate base for wholehearted cooperation in the fight against the Axis powers. This policy can make for a real equality of sacrifice that would evoke a ready response from every section of the people. It would guarantee the immediate success of the government's new manpower proposals. It would strengthen the government because it would have the complete support of a united people. Already the magnificent resistance of the Soviet people has led to a wide movement of support and solidarity with them, embracing every section of the people without regard to political or religious opinions. Let the leaders of the Labour Party, Trade Union Congress and Cooperative Movement respond to the urgency of the situation by withdrawing all present bans and restrictions on their members taking part in united activity. Let them encourage, assist and take part in every kind of common movement aimed at strengthening the Anglo-Soviet alliance. Such action would cement the unity of the British and Soviet people. Such unity in Britain would be hailed with joy by the working people in Nazi Germany and occupied Europe, and would strengthen the great international alliance of the peoples of Britain, the Soviet Union, America and China against the fascist powers. The Communist Party will do everything in its power to make this possible, and we pledge ourselves to serve the common cause in a manner that will add to the unity, power and dignity of the whole labour movement. In the struggle against fascism, the Communist Party has a record of which every one of its members may be proud. There is no other political party in Britain which commands from its membership such devotion, untiring energy, work and sacrifice as that shown by our members. Our meetings are the largest and most impressive in the country. Our sales of literature are the envy of every other working class organisation. The financial support given our party by the working people represents something entirely new in British politics. The political influence of the party grows. What it has to say is listened to with respect even by its enemies. Thousands of new members have joined the Communist Party in 1941, and we are confident that thousands more are going to join in 1942. The Communist Party will fight for the adoption of its policy of victory by every conceivable means of political agitation, education and organisation. We will reach out to every part of Britain in the most powerful and widespread political campaign it has ever seen. We shall be stimulated and inspired by the traditions of the British people, by the sacrifices and examples of labour pioneers, by the memories of the sufferings of the people in this war, by the hallowed memories of our comrades lying in Spanish earth when fascism struck its blows at Republican Spain, by the thought of the 4 years epic struggle of the Chinese people. We shall be fortified by the deathless example and courage of our comrades in France, Holland, Belgium, Poland, the Balkan countries, Norway and Nazi Germany, for we are bound to them by sacred ties of an internationalism whose proudest mission is now being accomplished in the smashing of fascism. Above all, we will try and acquit ourselves on the field of battle, in the workshops and all forms of national service, with that wonderful and ever-inspiring spirit shown by the Soviet people. Out there on that gigantic battlefront, at staggering cost in life and territory, the Soviet people have fought and are fighting the greatest battles of all time. The world has paid its tribute. Hitler has been compelled to admit he faces a people to whom the word defeat is unknown. They have done it with a serenity and calmness, courage and confidence that has added strength to all men and women of goodwill in every country fighting fascism, and inspired conquered peoples to rise up, resist and fight for their freedom. The strength and significance of the resistance of the Soviet people lies in their unbreakable unity, and because they have a mighty and powerful Communist Party led by Joseph Stalin. Just as this is vital and essential in the Soviet Union and the guarantee of its victory, so it is vital and essential that we too in Britain organise a mighty and powerful Communist Party. We invite those of you who agree with its policy to join the party now, so that together we can help destroy forever the Nazi war machine in Europe. Once that is done, the Italian and Japanese jackals and all the vile and treacherous quivering filth will soon be put in their graveyards. None can foretell the struggles that lie ahead of us in 1942. But we know for a certainty that while they will be bitter and take their toll, we can, alongside our Soviet, American and Chinese allies, be victorious. Then we will have avenged our present and future sacrifices and bereavements. We shall do so because we will infuse throughout Britain the fighting spirit expressed in the burning words of a Soviet poet. From west to east, from north to south, let the workers talk to the fascist hounds in the only tongue they understand, fire and sword, and the biting wit of the bayonet edge.